And we're live. Hello. Let's see. There's Chaya saying shalom all. Hello, folks. If you're out there, if you can hear me, give us a wee shout. We had a bit of bother going on the other day as planned, which kind of involved technical stupidity, I think, on my part. I'm being quite tired and feeling quite stupid. So it was I called it a technical error, but I couldn't get on the other night, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why, and had stupidly left the cable unplugged. It's one of those. Yeah, thank you very much for joining me. Welcome to Doc Sloan's Science Fiction Station, our Dune book club. We're on chapter 42 tonight. We've been away for a wee while, and we've been pretty ill, to be honest with you. So we've been quite sick. Excuse me. And I've made sort of several attempts to get back on here without kind of realizing how sick I've been, and I've got told off by my wife quite badly. So I've been very unwell for pretty much since Boxing Day. So I do apologize for all of these starts and stops and so on. I actually posted a thing the other week saying, "Hey, we're back," and the next night I was sick as a parrot again. So it's one of those things where I've kind of been wanting to be better than I am, and kind of not really acknowledging how sick I've been. So in terms of the book club, I know it's been a wee bit erratic, but ultimately the goal is to get all of these chapters will be together within the playlist so that we can look at the book and run with this stuff, I suppose, alongside it if we like in the future, So thank you very much for all of your kind messages. And apologies for the starts and stops and so on. And I have a chunk of correspondence to catch up, as I think I've said with some of you. So I have literally been throwing up nonstop for a month, and occasionally get near a computer. But we've been having attacks of rigors as well, which is to do with your body temperature. So I've literally been kind of housebound for a while, but not even sort of able to do too much at all, But thank you very much for your kind wishes and stuff like that. And it is good to see you all. So thank you very much for joining us. There's Chai saying shalom all. Matt S says hi. Sean says good to see you. Hope you're feeling better. Thank you, Sean. Excuse me. Great to see you back with us. Hello, everyone, says Matt. And Chai says, may God bless you with a complete and speedy recovery. Thank you very much, Chai. Yeah, I'm not 100%. I think if you could see the last episode, you could tell I was going quite badly, and I kind of just thought it was my cough getting a bit worse, and I'd picked up quite a nasty chest infection. I thought it was COVID, to be honest with you, and it wasn't. So I still have managed to not get COVID at all. But yeah, it's kind of messed with a bit of sleep and everything, I'm trying to get our Dune book club, and excuse me. I suppose even with the end of year thing, I've been wanting to have a wee look back at the year in science fiction and fantasy and so on. So I'd like to get a wee program up and running, and I'd like to get to the end of the Dune book club as well. Of course, folks, we're not too far from the end, and we have quite a short chapter tonight. In terms of what is ahead. The rest of the chapters ahead are quite chunky to the end of the book. And in terms of, I suppose, me taking notes and so on, I've got the wrong glasses on. Hang on. There we go. That was very quickly apparent. In terms of my notebooks, etc. So we'll on this chapter 42, I'll finish this third notebook. There we go. To the end of this one, and we have now started a fourth one. And I dare say, even though there's only a few chapters ahead, we're going to fill up, I suppose, a reasonable amount of stuff on this. So thank you. There's a few bits and pieces I have to catch up with, a few letters I've got from people, etc., etc. And as always, I will get in touch with all of you and give you a wee shout back, etc. But I've actually sort of got to get a chance to get a day and sit at the computer and sit and do all of these. I kind of got a few off there the other day. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you're all keeping well. The world's a crazy place as always. And we're starting to get a bit more sunshine, I suppose, during the day, but our weather's been pretty horrendous here. and just an awful lot of it is very stormy, very cold, very wet, very miserable, very dark and cloudy and ominous, and very little daylight to go with it lately. So it's nice to sort of see spring on its way. I suppose the old Irish festival of spring starts on the 1st of February, doesn't it? I think Imbolc, is it? Have I got the right one there? Hang on, before I say something stupid. Yeah, it was. It's Imbolc, also known as St. Bridget's Day. On the 1st of February is kind of like the old Celtic spring, starting early a bit. But yeah, look forward to spring getting here and our weather picking up. Let's have a wee quick look then, I suppose. So I'm going to flip over from our notebooks, and we'll have a Dune book club number 4 going. So we've got 2 books to run with tonight. And bear with me a wee second. I'm just out with the girls, out walking the dogs there a wee bit. So, as always, quite disorganized. We'll just get our copy of the book open. And the way my book is bent with the spines and stuff now, I'm kind of having to use paper weights to keep it open. Where are we? I had another one there. Paperweight. There we are. Chapter 42. Right. So yes, indeed. I hope you're all keeping well. Feel free to chime in, folks, as we go along through the chapter. I suppose briefly, this chapter 42 is, I suppose, where Paul conquers Shai Hulud, and I suppose it represents a number of things for us, but particularly within the hero quest, this kind of thing. This is kind of conquering the dragon, if you like, slaying the beast and gaining what we might call the pearl of great wisdom. The boon, I suppose, the reward for, and I suppose he's not really slaying the beast, but it is conquering it here, and it has different. I suppose it has different associations in terms of what that means to be a Fremen and for the Fremen within this chapter. So we're going to see a wee bit about driving a worm, I suppose, and in a kind of funny way, I suppose. As much as Dune is a bit of a buildings Roman, this is kind of the equivalent of Paul Atreides' driving test. It's a rite of, I'd say, it's a rite of adulthood as well. And within this chapter, we have a fair bit of dialogue, I suppose, between Paul and Stilgar. This rite of passage, I suppose, represents another rebirth for Paul Atreides. And it also creates, I suppose, a political problem for Paul. And I think also sows the seeds here of potential political problems for Paul later on. And when I mean later on, I mean in Dune Messiah, I think. Let me see. I might be thinking of something else there. So it's kind of interesting that we get a wee bit of detail on how we drive a worm, and we get a little bit again, I suppose, of the building of the legend around Paul. And of course, it ends. This chapter ends with almost they're almost ready to head off on the worm on a summer holiday, but we have a little bit of I suppose imminent danger or intrigue with the arrival of an ornithopter. So it's a short, punchy little chapter, plenty of dialogue. I don't think it'll take us too long to get through. And as always, let's start with the epigraph. Let's have a wee look at it. Let's just read it from the text. Let's bring this over. Okay. So you cannot avoid the interplay of politics within an orthodox religion. This power struggle permeates the training, education, and disciplining of the Orthodox community. Because of this pressure, the leaders of such a community inevitably must face that ultimate internal question: to succumb to complete opportunism as the price of maintaining their rule, or risk sacrificing themselves for the sake of the Orthodox ethic. Excuse me. And we're told that comes from Muad'Dib, The Religious Issues. There's a good title for a book. By the Princess Irulan, another one of Irulan's classics. Let's just have a wee look at it and see what we're told. Within this, I suppose you can't avoid the interplay of politics within Orthodox religion. So politics, if we want to run with that, we can define as the science, as we all know, hopefully at this point, of the happiness of the human race, of humanity. If we want to go with the Aristotelian one, and where the individual's subservient to the collective, if you like, in terms of happiness. Orthodox is a good word. It's a Greek word, and depending on how you want to translate it, you could see it as either a righteous opinion or the correct opinion, the true correct opinion, if you like. So it's about the interplay of politics, about what makes you happy within a religion that determines what is the right opinion or the correct opinion to hold, if you see what I mean. And this power struggle within this permeates it. We're told that it goes into where all the training, educating, disciplining of the Orthodox community. So at the core of where that community behaves, if you like, how that community turns out its citizens, how it trains them, educates them, disciplines them, how it punishes them as well. Because of this pressure, the leaders of such a community must inevitably face an ultimate internal question. So, if you want to run one of these communities, the leaders have to face this question: do we succumb to complete opportunism as the price of maintaining their rule? In other words, pretty much run it like a standard kind of religion, if you like, or risk sacrificing themselves for the sake of the orthodox ethic. So it's kind of almost that they would succumb, I think. It's almost like a choice to the opportunism of power within a community where you get to tell everybody what the correct opinion is and how much power you would have over that. Or ultimately, I suppose it's put sacrificing themselves, the ability to lose yourself to that orthodoxy if you're seen to not maintain that behavior, if you see what I mean. I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. But yes, the interplay is unavoidable of politics about what makes us happy, as opposed to what's the correct way of thinking, is the way I would look at this. And the leaders within such a community are going to end up basically at a crux where there's a paradox, where they can either maintain that righteous thinking themselves, and that, but by, I suppose, fall prey to it if they fall out of that kind of thinking, like anyone could. I suppose it's a little bit Orwellian, but happiness versus the correct thinking. I think in that sense it is. I don't know. Sometimes I have to question whether religion is political in that sense, and sometimes I think not. Sometimes I think it is. It's one of those questions that I would bounce around a fair bit and not really be happy with any answer that I come up with. Though I get the sense that at its core, religion should be political, if that makes sense. If I suppose the opposite of orthodoxy is heterodoxy, which is other teachings, other thinking, other opinions. Sorry. Excuse me. And if we just want to break those words down as well, just I suppose religion is from religare, religio, to bind, to be obligated towards an obligation in Latin. And politicus from Greek, from the polities, is the citizen, polis, city, police, even these kind of words. So it's a comment, I suppose, on politics within religion, and the power struggle, I suppose, of the desire to make people happy versus the desire to make them think correctly. Ultimately, something's going to clash there. I suppose you can't make everybody happy all the time, can you? Dear. There's Telios Dewiz saying, howdy, y'all. Howdy, Babs. How you doing? Telios says, evening, Doc. Evening. Thank you very much for joining us, Babs. We got here in the end. Chai is saying that orthodoxy is based on the word of God. The politics are the words of the people trying to live by God's words. Yeah, I suppose ultimately impractical dogma versus the practicality of where it falls down for me is the way I look at it is that religion tends to practice, its goal is happiness in a different life. I think ultimately sometimes, and what equates to happiness in this life, I suppose, sometimes what you're told. I don't know, and I think it's kind of interesting sometimes in how different cultures look at I suppose the idea of the afterlife and how you're rewarded, etc. Or if you've had there's the concept that if you've had a poor, impoverished life in the real world, that in the afterlife you'll be rich and wealthy. This kind of thing. I don't know. There's quite a lot to think about there. Hmm. It's an interesting little epigraph to begin with. I think it's going to have to do ultimately with what is it in relation to within this chapter. I think it's really pointing towards the dynamic between Paul and Stilgar within I suppose, the troop, and within the overall hierarchical structure of the Fremen, and external of even just Siege Tabor, I suppose. Um, and the pressure that the leaders come under, there's pressure in this chapter, I suppose, both on Paul and on Stilgar. And interestingly, I suppose, the where the pressure comes from, I think, is a thing that we'll have a wee chat about. But it's the young men again, and it kind of makes me ask a few questions about Fremen culture. Right. So there we go. So let's get cracking, folks. We begin with Paul waiting on the sand outside the giant maker's line of approach, and I must not wait like a smuggler, impatient and jittering. He reminded himself, I must be part of the desert. We get a wee reference almost right at the beginning of this chapter to smugglers. It's going to frame the chapter, bookend it, if you like. We're going to end the chapter with the smugglers as well. Must not wait like a smuggler, impatient and jittering, must be part of the desert. And I suppose that's maybe going to be a lesson that's going to apply later on as well. So the thing we're told is now minutes away now, filling the morning with the friction hissing of its passage. Its great teeth within the cavern circle of its mouth spread like an enormous flower. And I've made a wee note here. That's a little Jungian mandala there, is what that made me think of. The spice odor from it dominated the air. So we've got that sense. We've had a little picture painted, the sense, that smell of cinnamon that we get with spice. And we're told that Paul's still suit rode easily on his body, and he was only distantly aware of his nose plugs and his breathing mask. Stilgar's teaching, the painstaking hours on the sand, overshadowed all else. And this kind of reminds me, I suppose, it's the way we go with Paul. Sometimes, often, that the lessons he's been taught in the past by his various tutors, and almost all of the main characters within that are on the side of Paul Atreides, if you like, are teachers or tutors to him. So this is a little example of him having a memory of Stilgar's teachings here. And I suppose, and again, it's going to educate us a little bit on how we go about riding a worm. How far outside the maker's radius must you stand in pea's hand? 0.5 meter for every meter of the maker's diameter. This is the correct answer. Stilgar says, why? To avoid the vortex of its passage and still have time to run in and mount it. You've ridden the little ones, bred for the seed and the water of life. But what you'll summon for your test is the wild maker, an old man of the desert. You must have proper respect for such a one. And I suppose we come back to this little flashback to this memory. Now the thumper's deep drumming blended with the hiss of the approaching worm. So we get a wee bit of a mention of the old man of the desert, I suppose, and again here, for those of us who have read The Dragon in the Sea, I suppose you'll get the dragon. No pun intended. The Dragon in the Sea is almost a dry run for Dune, and there's many ideas in it that are to do with waves wave mechanics, etc., this kind of thing, in relation to the sea, that if you simply change the word sea to sand, you can bring them in from the Dragon in the Sea and put them into Dune. And it's this kind of thing, this idea that we have the old man of the desert here, and it's kind of a desert inversion of the old man of the sea, who is Proteus. I just was curious about this, that we a few sort of references to the Maker as the old man of the desert. But there we go, Proteus 102. Let's have a wee quick look. Page 80. Mm, 102. Did I say that? That's just Proteus is the old man of the sea. He's a shapeshifter, isn't he? I suppose is it Menelaus encounters him, I think, on the way back from oh goodness, I wouldn't find it amongst all that text. I'll have a wee nosy into it, but I thought that there's definitely worth a look into Proteus. I'll tell you what, rather than hunting through that book very quickly, let me just there we go. The Old Man of the Sea. On Wikipedia, if you want to check it out, folks, just type in Proteus. Early prophetic sea god or god of rivers and oceanic bodies of water, one of several deities whom Homer calls the Old Man of the Sea, Halios Geron. Some may ascribe a specific domain to Proteus, call him the god of elusive sea change, which suggests the constantly changing nature of the sea or the liquid quality of water. He can tell the future, but in a mytheme familiar to several cultures, will change his shape to avoid doing so. He answers only to those who are capable of capturing him. From this feature of Proteus comes the adjective protean, meaning versatile, mutable, or capable of assuming many forms. Protean has positive connotations of flexibility, versatility, and adaptability. Worth having a wee look at there, and then you'll find stuff in Homer, and you'll find stuff in Apollodorus, etc. And he's connected, of course, to the Trojan War and to prophecy. And we have this association with Proteus, with the worm, which I think is kind of interesting. I think there must be more to it than that. Worth investigating. And of course, for anybody who's seen the Sandman or knows the Sandman comics, of course, but if you've seen the Sandman recently, we see Lucifer, we see the Sandman and Lucifer Morningstar play this game, basically, and it's to get a bit of information, isn't it, I suppose? So there we go. The old man of the desert, show him proper respect. Now, I'm back to the meantime. The thumper's deep drumming blended with the hiss of an approaching worm, and Paul breathed deeply, smelling the mineral bitterness even through his filters. The wild maker, the old man of the desert, loomed almost on him, its cresting front segments through a sand wave that would sweep across his knees. So we're nicely building tension here, I suppose, and delaying the arrival with the worm. It won't last too long, to be honest with you, but we're getting this little lesson, drinking in the scene, I suppose, with our senses. And Herbert's painting this picture of this enormous beast. And of course, it's going to be legendary, isn't it? Paul's thoughts are, come up, you lovely monster. Up, you hear me calling. Come up, come up. I think that there, but just that bit there. Come up, you lovely monster. He thought, up, you hear me calling. Come up, come up. You know, it's well, the thing it reminded me of was Beowulf. It's like, come on, here I am. It's a bit of bravado, a bit of confidence, I think, in Paul's thoughts here. It's the right kind of mood for him, I think, for our hero to have here. And of course, we'll see that he has a wee bit of a little bit of an inflated opinion of himself in a bit, which will get sort of spanked down a bit. So we're told the wave lifted his feet, the surface dust swept across him, and he steadied himself. His world was dominated by the passage of that sand, the clouded curving wall, that segmented cliff, the ring line sharply defined in it. And I've just written now, here we go. So Paul lifted his hooks, sighted along them, leaned in, felt them bite and pull, and he leaped upwards, planted his feet against the wall, leaning out against the clinging barbs. And we're told that this is the true instant of the testing, this moment. I suppose we have a few of these ifs, ors statements, but if he had planted the hooks correctly at the leading edge of the ring segment, opening the segment, the worm would not roll down and crush him. Okay. So that's how it works. We've had a kind of running thread with the maker hooks throughout the book, going all the way back to things like the scene in the I suppose the Fremen tent, isn't it? If I use the right word. The still tent, where they're trying to figure out the different parts of the Fremen kit. That's it, etc. And we've never quite sort of got the gist of these kind of hooks, if you like. But as we go through the book from that point, we get little glimpses, little clues. And here we get to see them actually in use and in some detail. And this is his test. Yeah, it's a bit like his driving test. There are ifs here. Things might not go according to plan. Excuse me. So let's just see where I'm at. Check my notes here. He's big. Goodness gracious. There we go. Paperweights. So the worm slowed. It glided across the thumper, silencing it. Slowly it began to roll up, bringing those irritant barbs as high as possible away from the sand that threatened the soft inner lapping of its ring segment. So I suppose we get a wee bit of a point of view for the worm here. What's that? So these things, in they go, and they irritate the worm, and it'll roll all the way up to as far away as possible with these hooks from the sand to stop this irritation that gets into the inner lapping of its ring segment. Paul found himself riding atop the worm, felt exultant. You know, he's doing it on his own for the first time. And here we go, I suppose, a little bit of a clue here into his character. Paul found himself riding atop the worm. He felt exultant, like an emperor surveying his world. He suppressed a sudden urge to cavort there, to turn the worm, to show off his mastery of this creature. It's an interesting little paragraph there. What to say about it? The simile there that's used, like an emperor surveying his world. He is a duke surveying his world, I suppose, and it's not maybe long till he will be an emperor surveying his world. It's an interesting simile to use, I suppose, because soon he will be an emperor surveying his world. And then, of course, we get this repressing of the sudden urge to cavort there and show off his mastery of the creature. So this goes back, of course, to Stilgar's warning. And he suddenly understands it. And again, this is to do with this comes up a couple of times within this chapter. Brash young men, the young men who are problematic, if you like. But we're told that he suddenly understood Stilgar's warning, that the brash young men who danced and played with these monsters, doing handstands on their backs, removing both hooks, replanting them before the worm could spill them. You know, it's a real sort of I don't know, daredevilry, if you like. Dangerous sports for the Fremen, and a bit of display. It's interesting to imagine them, various young Fremen, doing these kind of things, showing off on the day they ride their first worm, and it probably ending up quite bad for them. The idea of them doing handstands and stuff like that kind of made me think a wee bit of, as it usually would, you'd have to be me, wouldn't you, of the bull leaping at Minot, at Knossos, sorry. If you ever have a look at those mosaics and friezes, etc., of people doing the bull of Minos. There we go. I've managed to get my books organized behind us, folks. Let me see. I suppose you probably is pretty famous. This is quite an old book on the subject. Is this Arthur Evans' book? Oh no, this is Leonard Cottrell's book on the book. There's one of them up at the top, but you can actually kind of see the diagram, and it kind of just the idea of these Fremen. I don't know. I've got a fertile imagination. I kind of started imagining a few sort of Fremen doing the young men doing their driving tests, if you like, showing off and getting flattened, or or maybe pulling off a very good double backflip or something, and secretly getting applauded, but getting told off for it. So yeah, it's a big worm, and it could easily flatten everybody, and we really shouldn't muck around on it too much. Suddenly, Paul gets it, despite his exultance, that this emotional joy that he's feeling. So Paul goes about his business here. He leaves one hook in place, releases the other, and plants it lower down the side. When the second hook, we're told, is firm and tested, he brings down the first one, and thus worked his way down the side of the and the maker rolled. And as it rolled, we're told, it turned, coming around the sweep of flour sand where the others waited. So he's being quite careful here. He stopped mucking around, or he stopped mucking around before he started, I suppose. And we get a wee sense of kind of how that the Fremen sort of manipulate with these hooks this worm and turn it. And we'll get a bit more of this as we can sort of see that they can also kind of, I don't know, they've almost got an accelerator for the worm, don't they? Excuse me. So Paul saw them, we're told then, saw everybody else come up, using their hooks to climb and avoiding the sensitive ring edges until they were on the top. And then they rode at last in a triple line behind him. I think, the David Lynch film does that pretty well. I think the whole, we get a bit of triumphant music, exultant music, I think, at that point, steadied against their hooks. So at this point, Stilgar moves up through the ranks and checks Paul's hooks for positioning, and glared up at Paul's smiling face. So this is kind of reminiscent, I suppose, of before we look at it, I would say it's kind of reminiscent of Jessica. Jessica's admonishment of Paul following the death of Jamis. I would say this is something similar. So it's about not giving him a big head, I suppose. Does that make sense? So Stilgar says, "You did it, eh? That's what you think. You did it. Well, now I tell you, that was a very sloppy job. We've had 12-year-olds who do better. There was drum sand to your left where you waited. You could not retreat there if the worm turned that way." Paul's reply is, "I saw the drum sand," but we're told that the smile slipped from Paul's face. Stilgar says, then why did you not signal for one of us to take up position secondary to you? It was a thing you could do even in the test. And we're told that Paul swallowed and faced into the wind of their passage. It's a common thing in this book where people are a little bit emotional and don't want to show it, that they turn away, as if that does the full job of hiding these things, So Stilgar's admonished, "You think you did a good job? You didn't. It's sloppy. 12-year-olds could do better." And it really, it's a pity that's not in the David Lynch version, isn't it? His kind of exalted moment. It really does bring him down a little peg. Stilgar is quite right. He's pointing out risks and the fact that this is all to do with the fact that as much as it's Paul's moment, his rite of passage, if you like, the trip is always a consideration, and that we should always be thinking of the trip, even when we're being tested individually, I think, is what we get from this. Stilgar continues, "You think it bad of me to say this now, but it's my duty. I think of your worth to the troop. I don't want you getting flattened either. If you had stumbled into that drum sound, the maker would have turned towards you." And then Paul's response here, again, a little bit indicative of Paul's character, I think. In spite of a surge of anger, And we do get these little bursts of anger with Paul. In spite of a surge of anger, he knew that Stilgar spoke the truth. So he's not too happy about this, but he knows it's true. It's a hard truth, if you like. But we're told that I think this bit's the interesting part. It took a long minute and the full effort of the training he had received from his mother for Paul to recapture a feeling of calm. I apologize, he said. It will not happen again. And I thought that that's quite interesting in terms of how we've seen Paul and I suppose emotional states that are attributed to him. As we go throughout the first part of the book, I'd say that the word that we primarily associate with Paul is caution. And as we proceed, I suppose with the tragedy, etc., anger is a thing that surfaces with him that requires calming, if you see what I mean. And I suppose we see less caution with Paul. But of course, we're told that it's a very positive attribute, aren't we? It's not that this is to do with caution. It's just that this is another one of these little surges of anger. However, I thought, in light of what he's being told here, but apart from that, I think he's managed to write a worm. He should know that. I apologize, it won't happen again. It's an intelligent. Yeah, he knows the truth of it. It makes sense. I should have done that. There's not really need to be too angry about it. So it almost seems like it's the thing that's made him most angry so far in the book. Almost the level of, and I would say it's probably not true, but it seems to me just the level of self-restraint that it suggests seems to be a lot longer than anything else that we've looked at. Paul's usually quite good at getting things under control, but this one took a long minute. He's not happy. He's angry. And it's to recapture his calm. Yeah. So he gets it, I suppose he gets it back. And then Stilgar continues, in a tight position, always leave yourself a secondary, someone to take the maker if you cannot. Remember that we work together. That way, we're certain we work together, eh? And he slapped Paul's shoulder. So it's a conciliatory tone, conciliatory gesture. Sorry about that. Noodles. That's one of our doggies barking there. And Paul says, of course, we work together. Agreed. And of course, at this point, Stilgar says, now, show me you know how to handle a maker. Which side are we on? So we're going to get a little bit more of a lesson here. A bit of worm lore, if you like. So Stilgar's behavior there, I think, is bang on. It's educational. It's designed to, I suppose, take away the idea of having a bit of a big head about it. It's also designed to focus him on the tribe or the troop's needs and how he should think about the troop. And we're going to have a sort of another way where Paul doesn't sort of think of the troop's needs, I would say. And as much as it's to do with his decision of where we go in a moment or two, it's a decision that I think doesn't suit the idea of what Stilgar thinks are the troops' needs at that point. Although we'll see that change. So very much with that idea of the epigraph at the beginning, with the orthodoxy in politics, of course, and tradition, I suppose, to a degree here. We're going to see this little tension build here between Stilgar and Paul, and it's something that could get out of hand, I think. But off we go with a little bit of worm driving, folks. I'll just catch up on any wee comments here. There's Shamal Karam saying, may Shai Hulud bless you all. Hello, Shamal. Thanks very much for joining us. Hi. Thank you. Hope you're keeping well. Have I got that? Oh, no, I don't have that on live chat. Hang on. There we go. In case I'm missing something, folks. I was supposed to turn that on, but it's gives you a wee bit of a different responses than top chat, doesn't it? So there we go. So Paul glanced down at so Stilgar gives him a sort of question here, and I don't think we sort of get a proper answer to it, but we'll get I suppose that the answer in response to inaction, I think, if that makes any sense. So we're told that Paul glanced down at the scaled ring surface on which they stood. He noted the character and size of the scales. So we get a little bit of worm lore here. They grew larger off to his right, smaller to his left. He knew that every worm moved characteristically with one side up more frequently than the other. As worms get older, therefore, the characteristic upside becomes an almost constant thing, and the bottom scales therefore grow larger, heavier, and smoother, and the top scales can be told by the size alone on a big worm. Good to know. So there you go. So and a little bit of information about the worms, that they favor a particular side, and over their life that side tends to be favored as they travel above the surface, and it has an effect on how their scales develop. So there we go. Excuse me, I'll take some fluids here, folks. Driving a worm sounds fun. This really does remind me on a driving test in a funny way, except just change it for a worm in. And there's even a couple of theory questions, if you know what I mean. Goodness gracious, there's Shimal Khan donating $4.99. Oh, thank you very much, Shimal. That's very kind of you. Appreciate your work, Doug. Thank you. That's very kind of you, Shimal. Thank you. Well, if only we could get more of it done, I suppose. But we're getting there, and that's very kind. Thanks a lot. Dear, where are you at, Shimal? Let us know. Oh yeah, I suppose everybody's. We've had the bad weather recently. I haven't really spoken to you guys in a while, but it's been horrendous here, and yeah, very very wintry. Not good at all. We had the heating on full blast. And it's I think we're expecting another harsh cold spell. I think over the next week or so, possibly. But I've been out with the dogs today. Lovely and mild here. You're in Los Angeles. Wow, excellent. I suppose you're having some weather problems and climate problems and all sorts of things in LA these days. But I hope you're keeping safe, Shimal, and you and your family and friends, etc. I've never been to America. LA always looks kind of very big, scary place to me. But yeah, but it looks pretty cool, I suppose, culture-wise and stuff like that as well. Love to get to America sometime. It's a big place, though. I always think of America as scarily big. Just one gigantic country, you know. Staying alive, excellent. I'm trying to think if I had to pick. That's the thing. I feel like if you were to travel to America, I suppose, from my point of view, where would you go if you could pick a place? It would be quite a tricky one. You know, but a lot to choose from. So yeah, okay, yeah, we're driving a worm. Top scales, bottom scales, a little bit of knowledge here. Yeah, it does remind me a bit on a driving test, I suppose, this rite of passage. Paul shifts the hooks. We're told he moved to the left, motioned the flankers down to open the segments along the side and keep the worm on a straight course as it rolled. When he had the worm turned, he motioned two steersmen out of the line into positions ahead. So this is interesting. We get a bit more. Just hold a hook and let them. How do you get the worm to go? This kind of thing is a giddy up, and he says, "Where are we?" Just to get my notes here. Ak hi yo, he shouted in the traditional call. The left side steerman opened a ring segment there. And we're told in a majestic circle, the maker turned to protect its open segment. Full around it came. And when it was headed back to the south, Paul shouted Gerat, which we're told is Fremen for straight ahead. Gensi Geradas. Yeah. Yeah. There's a bit of sense of German about it, maybe. I don't know. Fremen word that we'll find in the terminology of the Imperium. The steerman released. It says here, I thought this was an interesting one. I thought it was a wee bit of a. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me see. The left side steers man. We got the steers man released his hook. So we either have a plural problem or a pronoun problem there. Steersmen released their hooks, or steersman released his hook. I think that's a misprint in my book, folks. So, maybe I'm on page. That'll be the first line of page 436 in this edition. I have the steersman released his hook. I'm just wondering if anybody's got a copy of the book. Maybe is this another one of our little misprints that we've found? Goodness, such a pedant I am. So yeah, we're circling the worm now. We're giving, we've got commands for straight ahead. We're circling as well. And I think this is quite good. So the maker, so the steersman released their hooks, and then the maker lined out in a straight course. So Stilgar's wee comment comes on here. Very good, Paul Muad'Dib. With plenty of practice, you may yet become a Sandrider. And of course, Paul frowns here. Was I not first up? So they're taking the piss out of him here. Excuse me. It's a little bit of friendly ribbing from the tribe, and he doesn't get it until they're all laughing their heads off at him behind. So a nice little light-hearted moment here. A wee bit of bathos to take away the tension. And of course, was I not first up? But from behind him, there came sudden laughter. The troops began chanting, flinging his name against the sky. So it's almost like a bit of an initiation ceremony for passing his driving test. And of course, so they're having a good laugh at his expense, and they shout his name, chanting it, Muad'Dib, 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 Muad'Dib. So it's all good. I think it's all quite good spirited, isn't it? He doesn't quite get it initially. And there we go. And it's kind of, we're getting quite an impressive sort of scene being created here. All of these Fremen riding this giant worm. Pardon me. And of course, did I miss a wee bit there? Yeah, about the worm. I don't think we've got to it just yet. Now, this next little section, I think, is hilarious. And I don't know what. And again, this is probably just my twisted sense of humor. But it's fun, it's conversational, and it's kind of quirky in a funny way. I do enjoy this little bit. I think we'll see what we think. See what we mean. Let's just put along to the rear of the worm's surface. We're told that Paul heard the beat of the goaders pounding the tail segment, and the worm picked up speed. So this is our acceleration control. I've made a wee note. Accelerator is that we have goaders who beat the worm at the back, and this makes it move quicker. So the worm picked up speed, their robes flapped in the wind, and a abrasive sound of their passage increased. And we're told that Paul looked back through the troop and was able to find Chani's face. And he looked at her as he spoke to Stilgar. And he's excuse me, they've had a good giggle, chanted his name, and he's still, so I am a Stilrider still, I'm a Sandrider still, yeah. And of course, Hal Yam, you are a Sandrider this day. So they're having a bit of a giggle. Of course you are. Excuse me. Hal Yam, we're told in Fremen, means now with an exclamation mark. So like, now you're a Sandrider this day. Or at last as well. So at last you're a Sandrider this day. We can take it either way. And of course, the prize for conquering your dragon, the worm, whatever we want to call it, the beast that must be slain or conquered by the hero, is a prize, some kind of boon in the heroic tradition. And this is what we get here. So, at last, you're a Sandrider this day. Now at last is what we're basically told. Then I may choose our destination. I get to choose where we're driving to. And Stilgar says that's the way of it. And here we go with the language. Now, this is quite an important quote, I think, here. I would have quoted this in the PhD a couple of times. Paul saying, and I am a Fremen born this day. Here in the Habana Erg, I have had no life before this day. I was a child until this day. and I've just thought that's got a heavily religious tone, and this is Paul running his myth, building his myth, and creating his myth deliberately. This is propaganda here, in a sense, from Paul for the Fremen's benefit, and it's hyperbolic. And then I think what comes after is Beathos. It depends on how you read it. I don't know if you guys agree with me or not. Shamal saying hot weather based Los Angeles, Nevada. Nevada desert, yes indeed. Excellent. Well, here we go. Tell me if you agree with me, folks. So we'll do this, just run through this. And I am a Fremen born this day. Here in the Habena Erg, I have had no life before this day. I was a child until this day. And Stilgar's response is, not quite a child. And then Paul says, but there was a cork sealing off my world, and that cork has been pulled. And Stilgar's response again is, there is no cork. And I just thought that Stilgar's responses are contrary. They're also pragmatic in a kind of way, and I thought that they were almost. I don't know if it's intentional, but to me, I found them to be quite a funny foil to Paul's sense of I don't know, Paul's grandiose words, if you like, that the I was nothing until, and it part of me, I suppose, the reason why I do think it funny, and it depends on where we're at with Dune. If we haven't read further on down it, we might not get this, but I'm sort of more thinking about the God Emperor and how he looks at Paul Atreides, and the fact that this is the moment, I suppose, where Paul considers himself a Fremen. And of course, the God Emperor does not consider Paul a Fremen. And I think it's just this speech and response from Paul here. The response from Stilgar, I just find it funny. Excuse me. What was it? 29 with Stilgar. I've written something else there to do with the writing. Not quite a child, Stilgar said. He fastened the corner of his hood where the wind was whipping it. And I've made a wee note of just a nice wee bit of alliteration there as well. Yeah, and also just I don't know that has there's something odd about it, and I really like Stilgar as a character, and he's one of those that we get to sort of try and understand Paul and later Alia through, if you like, through Stilgar's eyes, and I suppose from Herbert's point of view, Paul and Alia try to sort of make Stilgar understand them, but not quite a child. No, oh, my life's been corked up. There's no cork. It's and I don't know. It also kind of reminds me on what's it, Hercules Returns. That kind of, now it's time to ride like the wind. How do we do that? This kind of thing. It seems just a bit silly, but to me, I think it sounds like Paul trying to sort of build his legend a little bit, and it being slightly deflated by Stilgar. So we just, as much as I was this, I was unborn, I was not this, but there's a quick kind of change of subject here. I would go south, Stilgar, 20 thumbers. I would see this land we make, this land that I've only seen through the eyes of others. And I also made a wee note here, and I don't know what you think about it, but I've just put next to this land that I've only seen through the eyes of others, I've put a bit like Caladan, really, isn't it? I don't think you've seen much of Caladan either. So it's almost a bit of a pity party, not quite, but I've I could not see until my eyes were opened. It's that kind of thing. It's almost was it Arthurian kind of, I did not know my heart, how empty my heart was until it had been filled. This kind of thing, But it is of course another rebirth for Paul. And I suppose within this chapter, we're going to see this little brief confrontation between Paul and Stilgar, a sort of rise in tension between the two men because of an external situation. Sorry, I was wondering where I was going to run with that there. So I'll tell you what, we'll push on. I had an idea there, but I've lost it, and I don't want to sit and go, oh, I wonder what I was thinking of there. So Paul's thoughts here, as much as he says I would only see that I've only seen through the eyes of others in his prescient vision, what he wants to see is his son. And I would see my son and my family. I need time now to consider the future. So this is what Paul wants. And the prize that he's asking for successfully riding the worm, for conquering Shai Hulud, I want to go south 20 thumbers. I want to see my son and family. That's what he wants, and that's a personal thing. I need time now to consider, this is his thoughts, the future that is a past within my mind. The turmoil, the turmoil comes, and if I am not where I can unravel it, if I am not where I can unravel it, the thing will run wild. Right, I've made it right. Oh, maybe I've written sentences there twice. That's me being tired. Will run wild. Right, sorry. I'll just read that again. That was very sloppy. That's just my handwriting, and I've written phrases twice in a row there. I'll just read this paragraph from the book. I need time now to consider the future that is a past within my mind. The turmoil comes, and if I'm not where I can unravel it, the thing will run wild. So it'll run wild. It might not necessarily be a bad thing. And as of course, this is our, this is the jihad. This is all of the, what the golden path leads to, and the hopefully the prevention of the destruction of mankind. So what's important to him here? He wants to go see Leto II, I suppose. His baby, his son and family. And we'll have to ask questions about this later on. It's going to be quite important. There's an very important thing with this Leto II, I suppose, that we have to ask. And we've talked a wee bit about it in terms of the sacrifice at Aulis, if you like, and what Paul's choices are, and what he can see, what futures he can see, and what actions he takes and what he doesn't do, I suppose. Excuse me. So Stilgar looked at him with a steady, measuring face. Paul kept his attention on Chani. There we go. Seeing interest quicken in her face. So this is to do with this looming power struggle. Noticing also the excitement his words had kindled in the troop. Stilgar says, the men are eager to raid with you in the Harkonnen sinks. The sinks are only a thumper away. So Paul's response here, the Fedaykin have raided with me. They'll raid with me again until no Harkonnen breathes Arakeen air. Again, the goal here is genocide of the Harkonnens, if you like. Stilgar studied him as they rode, we're told. And Paul realized at this point, here we are, his realization that Stilgar was seeing this moment through the memory of how he had risen to command of the Tabar siege and to leadership of the Council of Leaders now that Liet Kynes was dead. And Paul's thoughts here are he has heard the reports amongst the young Fremen. Now, simply put, what we're being told here is that Stilgar is now looking at Paul through the eyes of his own memories when he did this, and how he has become a commander of a leader of men of Siege Tabar, and also part of the Council of Leaders, how these things go about. This is to do, I suppose, with tradition, with the rite of succession, the way that was, I suppose, with male succession in particular, within the Fremen. And of course, this is to do with this, the power struggle, of course, that permeates training, education, disciplining the leaders, the epigraph that we have at the beginning here. Do they succumb to complete opportunism, do what they want, in other words, or do they risk sacrificing themselves for the sake of the orthodox ethic? That's what's happening here. Will Paul have to sacrifice Stilgar? Stilgar wondering, will he himself be sacrificed, I suppose? Stilgar asks the question, do you wish a gathering of leaders? And I've put to be continued. There we go, folks. That's another big notebook filled up. I'll put this one down. There we go. I'll just show you this if you like, for anybody's not too sure. But there we go. This is what we've got. This is what we're doing. And we've got the first three filled up now. All of that there from our. There we go. The first one's is actually a monster book. It's thicker than the others. So we've got 3 whole volumes of this. We're going to keep doing them. And it occurred to me, we've got the opportunity to sort of dig some work out of this. Particularly some stuff that we've spent our time observing, I suppose, in the Dune series this time around. So here we go on my 4th one. I have to do something artistic on the front. Pardon me. There we are. There's Moo the dog saying good evening. Woof. Welcome to the doghouse, folks. Woof indeed. And said, hey, cool, I can't wait to go back and watch all your videos on the Dune play. The plenty of them, so cool. Thank you very much. I was actually, I've been thinking about it, and the book club's taken up a fair amount of time this year, but I'd like to get a few more videos done. And I did 3 sort of, well, they were meant to be on Dune, I suppose, but they were the Pelopid myths, which are linked to the family and Dune, the Atreides, etc. And I kind of wanted to do a little bit more to that to kind of finish it off and really demonstrate some of the classical stuff that's within classical mythology that's within Dune. I actually thought all the notes that we'd taken, we've got a pretty thorough analysis of Leto the First here, and I would really like to present him in terms of a bad father and as a villain, actually, as someone who's as villainous, I think, as the Baron. But it's been fun, and I mean, goodness gracious, the amount of stuff that we've scribbled down and we've found out, and words that's meanings we've discovered. It's so yeah, there's an awful lot of stuff here, but I suppose at the end of it we'll have 48 complete videos like this where we've covered an entire chapter, and we're going to finish, folks, because we all the way back at the beginning, I suppose, we had to make a decision on, do we begin with the prologue of Dune, which is actually Appendix 1, and we made a decision that we wouldn't. We would read the book as is. So our 48 chapters of the book, we've got 6 more to go. We're going to do one of these on Appendix 1, which is entitled The Ecology of Dune, and it's really important, I think. And I notice a lot of people don't read it. They think they've finished the story. It's massively important to understanding what's been done to the Fremen. And it's, of course, the story of Pardo Kynes, isn't it? And then we'll also, I think, we'll take one final episode, I suppose, just because they're not too long, to run through the remaining appendices. One of them is just a terminology. We'll not need to worry about it too much. But I think very important to understanding Dune, the religion of Dune. And one of my favourite things, I suppose, is the Appendix 3, the report on the Bene Gesserit motives and purposes. That leaves you with all sorts of questions, I think. Moo the dog, have I remembered my idea? No, I haven't. I'm sure it'll come back to me. It was something to do with, I think, just Paul and Stilgar chatting, I think. But no, sorry. My coffee's gone cold as well. I'll have to grab a fresh one. In fact, if you don't mind, very quickly, folks, it's a good place for me to stop just because we're into our new book. So if you don't mind, very quickly, I'll just run and quick intermission. I'll just run and grab a fresh brew because my mouth's getting a wee bit, and I'll be right back. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. Thank you very much for your patience, as always. Woof woof. Welcome back. Yeah, I've got a few things. I suppose a few things changed here. We've had a fair bit of bother trying to get any books or etc. off the shelf because I haven't had anything organised. So I've done a bit of organising finally, and it's not that everything's in here, but we've got a lot more books and science fiction material, I suppose, at our fingertips for when we need it. And we've got a good little sort of almost academic sci-fi library here. Just a small one, but it's a good enough reference one. And our classic stuff. But I was for Christmas, I managed to pick up. My son managed to pick me up a copy of goodness, what was it? House Harkonnen by Frank Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson. And I'd already got a copy of it. It was a nice thought of him. But he'd picked me up a couple of nice Judge Dredd books. But since I've been sick and for a wee while back, I've been reading the Elric series. And amongst other things, I finished them pretty much the other day and was very pleased to see, for anybody, just while we're quickly stopping, there's a new Elric book. And I actually bought the hardback because it was cheaper than the paperback, which is kind of stupid. But the Citadel of Forgotten Myths, and it's Michael Moorcock on good form. And I've just read the first of the tales within it, and what a delight! I'm going to do a wee video on this soon, but I just thought if anybody, we've talked about Elric and the Eternal Champion series as one of our pinnacles of good fantasy literature. Great character, great stories. It's really nice to see him back. I haven't bought an Elric novel since I think the late 90s, since I met Michael Moorcock. I think was probably the last 2 books I bought by him, which was a long time ago. So it's really nice. And looking forward to picking up some science fiction and fantasy literature stuff and movies, all sorts. It's been a good year for some things, not so much for others, I suppose. Excuse me. Okay, yeah. So just picking up where we were at. Good place for changing notebooks was a good place for an interval. So this, do you wish a gathering of the leaders, Stilgar asking? And this is this political situation that's going to emerge here. And I suppose it's kind of briefly dealt with by the two men, and but it's a thing that's kind of going to linger. Eyes blazed, we're told, among the young men of the troop. They swayed as they rode, and they watched. And Paul saw the look of unrest in Chani's glance, the way she looked from Stilgar, who was her uncle, to Paul Muad'Dib, who was her mate. And of course, Paul's response again is a little bit, and I don't know, I've written down, is this enigmatic or is it maybe childish? It's, you cannot guess what I want. It could be just, you cannot guess what I want. It could, but his thoughts are, I cannot back down here. I must hold control over these people. And so we talk about moments in Dune where we should be wary of Paul Atreides. Generally when his anger comes up, I think, but he has little moments, and this is one of them. This is, whenever we get through the whole series, we'll understand why. I cannot back down. I must hold control over these people. And I've put down that's an uh-oh moment, is what I would call it. Stilgar responds with a cold formality in his voice. You are the Mudir of the Sandrider this day. How do you use this power? And Paul's thoughts are here that we need time to relax, time for cool reflection, echoing what he wanted himself. I suppose it's more what he wants in a sense. We shall go south. And so the contradiction here with Stilgar is what he says is, even if I say we shall return back to the north when this day is over, we shall go south, says Paul, repeating himself. And Stilgar, we're told, has a sense of inevitable dignity enfolded him as he pulled his robe tightly around him. There will be a gathering. I will send the messages. So there's a formality to their language. There's a coldness to it. There's almost that these men are friends, have gotten to know each other. live and fight, and with each other, and rely on each other, for the the betterment of the tribe, etc. Something's happened here, and it's these young men whose eyes blaze. They're looking for blood. They want, and it's there's going to be a power struggle here. This is kind of how the Fremen succession works, I suppose. Yeah, we'll get to it in a little bit. Of course, Paul's thoughts here. He thinks, and we're getting this run of thought. He thinks that I'll call him out, and he knows he cannot stand against me. So it's the necessity that the young men will keep demanding blood. That they see Paul as superior to Stilgar, and therefore must kill Stilgar. They want, and that one of the men must be wasted, if you see what I mean, because of this. So again, Paul thinks he thinks I'm going to call him out. Also knows that he can't stand against me. That I suppose this sense of inevitable dignity that enfolds Stilgar, as we're told, that this is why that there's a fatalism about it. That if I have to fight this man, I'm not going to win. Which is not a good way to think, I suppose. But of course, Paul's thoughts here. He faces south of the wind against his exposed cheeks, thinking of the necessities of his decisions, we're told, and they don't know how it is. And I suppose here we go. This is, neither do we really, but this is the explanation for it, a bit of a justification. Paul knew, let me just read this from the passage actually. But he knew he could not let any consideration deflect him. He had to remain on the central line of the time storm. He had to remain on the central line of the time storm he could see in the future. There would come an instant where it could be unraveled, but only if he were where he could cut the central knot of it. So it's Paul's heading towards it. I suppose his decisions are heading towards a certain thing. And as much as I suppose there are multiple futures, etc., for him, whenever we get certain events that are maybe nexus points, things that are hidden, then who knows what goes on from there. We're getting a little bit of an explanation from him, but it's still vague enough. But he's got to, I've got to do this. But simply put, there could come an instant in the future where everything goes pear-shaped, is what he's saying here. I could stop it from going pear-shaped if it happens, but only if I'm in the exact right place at the right time, if you see what I mean. But his thoughts here are, I will not call him out if it can be helped, if there's another way to prevent the jihad. So it suggests that there must be elements of going ahead with jihad without jihad, where Stilgar is called out and Stilgar is not called out, I suppose. That both possibilities, that things can go ahead with both possibilities at this point. And so Paul would prefer not to call Stilgar out. Of course, Stilgar doesn't know this. A lot of keeping our thoughts to ourselves, really not really communicating properly between the two of them. It's very formal, very cold. And I think it does come from an uncomfortable realization for both men. So Stilgar says, we'll camp for the evening meal and prayer at the Cave of Birds beneath Habanya Ridge. And he steadied himself with one hook against the swaying of the maker, and gestured ahead at a low rock barrier rising out of the desert. A wee bit of geography for us as we go along. So we're told that Paul studied the cliff, the great streaks of rock crossing it like waves. No green, no blossoms softened the rigid horizon beyond it. The way to the southern desert, a course of at least 10 days and nights, as fast as they could goad the makers. So it's one of those things that you get it from the book, I suppose, here, but you don't get from any of the films or the TV show. You don't get the sense of these Fremen at the back of Orn going, "Gah!" which I think would make the worms a lot more interesting, a lot more fun. And it certainly on the screen, I think it'd be quite cool to see, people operating the worm in that sense. So there's a wee bit more to just getting on a worm and hanging on to a rope, I suppose. 20 thumpers away. And the way far beyond Harkonnen patrols. Paul, we're told. So I suppose what we were saying briefly earlier was that Paul gets to choose where they go. It's his reward. He wants to go south, go see the family and chill out. Kind of Stilgar's. Even if I say we should do that, there's a suggestion that Stilgar is hinting that shouldn't you choose something that would be more beneficial to the troop or the tribe, if you like. And that was the sense that I got, that, but it's still the young man's choice, if you see what I mean. It's part of the rite of passage of riding a sandworm. He gets to choose. So Paul, we're told, he knew how it would be. Dreams had shown him. One day as they went, it would be a faint change of colour on the far horizon. Such a slight change. He might feel he was imagining it out of his hopes, and there would be the new siege. So it's funny that again, that's kind of backs up to kind of, I suppose, justify why Paul's wanting to do what he wanted to do, I suppose, is that gives us a really, sorry, if I grab that notebook, it gives us a really good sense of him seeing this world through other people's eyes, if you like. I would see this land, we make this land that I've only seen through the eyes of others. I think this is another wee example of it. They haven't gone there yet. But the dreams had shown him that one day as they went, there would be a faint change of colour on the far horizon, such a slight. So there's this dream memory of this journey that they haven't undertaken yet. So you can kind of, I can kind of feel for Paul, get this idea of in fact, I've been wanting to write a story, something about this, but it reminds me a little bit. Again, there's an awful lot of these sort of myths and stories in here, but the idea of, and it's I don't think this is an overt thing or anything. It just, for myself, it reminds me a little bit of the Lady of Shalott wishing to gaze upon something with her own eyes, if you see what I mean. Anybody who's not familiar with the Lady of Shalott by Tennyson, have a read at that. What a great poem. It's fantastic. Great story. So yeah, there's a kind of conflict, but Stilgar, I suppose, maybe wanting one thing. I think Paul is also thinking of the benefit of the tribe, that they need to cool off, and maybe it's the young men that need to cool off, I suppose. But I think perhaps maybe Stilgar's thinking that the young men need to fight some Harkonnen to cool off, if you like. Stilgar, having said that we'll camp for the evening meal and prayer at the Cave of Birds, asks Paul, does my decision suit Muad'Dib? I suppose I could read that better. Does my decision suit Muad'Dib? The faintest touch of sarcasm tinged his voice. But, sorry, I'll just read this here. I've just paraphrased it, but I think the way Frank puts it's better. But Fremen ears around them, alert to every tone in a bird's cry or a Kilago's piping message, heard the sarcasm and watched Paul to see what he would do. So this kind of almost expectation for violence, isn't there? And the other thing I would say, by the way, is that particularly with the leadership of Stilgar and Paul in this case, that they're kind of leadership things that they do, the things that they say are public. They're almost a performance for the benefit of everyone. There's an awareness that there's little privacy within this form of communal life. So often, I see a level of theatrics, to be honest with you, in the leadership talk, if you like, within the book. Here's a little bit of it here. Paul's referring to him. Stilgar heard me swear my loyalty to him when we consecrated the Fidaikin. My death commandos know I spoke with honor. Does Stilgar doubt it? So it's a question to Stilgar, but it's a very public question. And of course, we're told that as much as sarcasm tinged Stilgar's voice previously, we're told here that real pain exposed itself in Paul's voice. Question always begets itself, I suppose, when any of the Atreides that have the voice use it. Is it deliberate? Is it part of his training? Is it part of the voice? Designed to garner an emotional reaction. So here's the crux of it, really, and I think it's interesting. Where particularly we've had Paul talking about I was not a Fremen until this day. I've been reborn, this kind of new person, and it's the continuing rebirths. We've seen Paul have several rebirths, if you like, metaphorical rebirths. And I suppose he's Paul Atreides, he's Usul, he's Muad'Dib, he's Paul Muad'Dib, he's the Atreides Duke. You know, he's the Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world. He's the Kwisatz Haderach. As a young man, he's picked up so many appellations in a couple of years. It's surprising he's not schizophrenic. So here we come to the problem, I suppose. I spoke with the Stilgar doubter. So Stilgar uses the troop name Usul. Usul, the companion of my siege, him I would never doubt. But you are Paul Muad'Dib, the Atreides Duke, and you are the Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world. These men I don't even know. And it's a bit of a statement from Stilgar there. I think it's a very punchy statement. And there's something quite truthful about it. And I suppose it also brings into question things like the people who serve two masters within the Dune universe. And it's, as Paul Atreides, what Paul wants for the Fremen, what Paul wants as to be an emperor. Ultimately, the desires for both groups will diverge at some point, won't they? And Usul, in this case, is seen as the Fremen. But who's Paul Muad'Dib? Who's this Duke? Who's this Atreides? Who's this Lisan al-Gaib? All of these things that people don't really know who you are in the context of those titles and what that person wants. And it's very insightful of Stilgar. And it's probably quite hard for Paul to hear. And I certainly think that he's been trying to present himself in an enigmatic way as part of his own myth. That we're told that the Atreides are very good at it, but part of it is to have the sense of sardonic about yourself and your sense of myth, if you like. And certainly Paul has it here, but Stilgar has been to me personally, I don't know if you agree with me or not, Stilgar has been a foil to Paul in this chapter, and it's kind of almost like a confrontation that's created out of nothing, but background rumble. It's like the young Fremen men are an angry chorus, if you know what I mean. That's just like a vengeful chorus or something out of Greek tragedy, just sitting there in the background. They're swaying and they're glaring, but it's still there's a way of, I suppose that this is kind of fixed in a sense. Again, Paul turned away. It doesn't like this, to watch Habanya Ridge climb out of the desert, the maker beneath them. And here, this is again, if we think about where Paul, if what I'm suggesting is true, where what Paul's words suggest here, where his mind goes to here, I think is a kind of a evidence of that. The maker beneath them, we're told, felt strong and willing, would carry them twice the distance of any other in Fremen experience. He knew it. Nothing outside stories told to children could match this old man of the desert. It's the third time we've heard that term. Proteus, our friend, the old man of the sea. It was the stuff of a new legend, Paul realized. There we go. And this is where his mind is, this hand on his shoulder again, that gripped his shoulder. It's the second time. Reassurance, I think, from Stilgar, but also that representation of the hand of agency and power and being his right hand. I think it's kind of, again, the hand imagery is often important within Dune. Paul looked at it, followed it along, followed the arm to the face beyond it, the dark eyes of Stilgar exposed between filter mask and stillsuit hood. The one, and here we go. This is Stilgar's, I suppose his pragmatism, his honesty, and his friendship here. Pardon me. The one who led Tabar's siege before me, he was my friend. We shared dangers. He owed me his life many a time, and I owed him mine. Paul replies, I am your friend, Stilgar. No man doubts it. Removes his hand short. It is the way. And it's almost an attempt to say, look, we're buddies. We're buddies, aren't we? But it doesn't need to be personal. It's just the way it is. It's orthodox. And I suppose we'll get that in a wee second, won't we? Paul saw Stilgar too caught up in the Fremen way to consider the possibility of any other. So again, we said orthodox, correct opinion, heterodox, other opinion, the other, as it's put here. I think if we go back to our little epigraph at the start of the book, I think it is really, sometimes they relate to events that happen elsewhere, but I think it's really meant for us to think of these two men and the situation they're in. And of course, it's almost a little bit of a contradiction. I think the way it's put is that Stilgar is too caught up in the Fremen way to consider the possibility of any other. We have evidence that previously that's not the case with Stilgar, that Stilgar is prepared to break with tradition where it makes sense, where it's for the good of the tribe, So it does suggest that the Fremen are very conservative in their thinking. No pun intended, I suppose, but they would be very slow to adapt change. So we get a little bit of insight here into the Fremen male succession, is the way I've put it. And I suppose in contrast to that, we can look at how Jessica succeeds from the Reverend Mother Romalo, and how one woman takes over the position of other within the authority of the tribe, how they do, and it results in one of their deaths. But it's how they do that is in quite harsh contrast to how two men would go about it. And to me, if you look at it in terms of the Fremen, where one warrior has to call out another simply because I think I'm a better fighter than you, even though you might be a better political leader, I'm going to kill you. One of the men is going to die, but there's nothing gained from it for the tribe except for water, if you see what I mean. Whereas when the women do this, whenever one of them passes on, when Romalo dies, there, as much as we've lost a person for the tribe, the experience of that person is maintained. There's something that stays with it. There's something more positive about it. Excuse me. So Paul saw that Stilgar was too caught up in the Fremen way to consider the possibility of any other way, any other opinion or thinking. Here, and here we're told this, here a leader took reins from the dead hands of his predecessor, or slew amongst the strongest of his tribe if a leader died in the desert. Stilgar had risen to be a naib in that way, we're told. So possibilities of how do you become the boss, if you like, in the Fremen. You take it from the dead hands of your predecessor. So, excuse me. This is really, really interesting to me. Now, for anybody who wants to know of a real life example of this, have a look at the priesthood at Nemi. Now, Nemi is a lake in south of Rome. We've talked about this a little bit before. And if I can, yes, here we go. It's great to have your books organized, isn't it? That you can actually, I know where that is. For the importance of this priesthood's quite interesting. There's Captain Badminton saying, howdy all, been a while. Thanks very much for joining us, Captain Badminton. Has been a wee while. I haven't been too well, so we've been off for a wee bit. But thank you very much for joining us. Anybody who's into mythology. Oh, now this is one of these books where naturally you're just going to get it abridged. This is what I would love, of course, is the 12-volume edition of this. This is the Golden Bough by Fraser. Best described as, I suppose, an anthropological work on mythology and mythography. And very famously begins with an examination of the King of the Wood, if you like, which is to do with the priesthood at Nemi, and all of the myths associated, I suppose, with the cult of Diana. To become the priest, there's one priest of this cult at Nemi, and to become that priest, you kill the previous priest. So simply put, it's one of those things that if you were a slave in ancient Rome and you escaped, you could bomb it to this grove at Nemi, Lake Nemi, and kill the priest there. And by doing so would become the high priest of Diana there, and nobody would harm you. The only person that's going to harm you is the next person that comes along. So that kind of line of succession is a particularly interesting one. And for anybody who wants to check it out, you can go there to Nemi today. It's just south of Rome, really. It's quite kind of a holiday resort for about the Romans in particular. Some of the Roman emperors would have houses on the lake, I think, holiday homes on the lake. So it's a very interesting one. And for me to try and explain the nature of that myth and the priesthood, I couldn't do it justice, but I highly recommend this book. The entire first part of this is in the King of the Wood, if you like, as the priest would be known. And it's it's an excellent. If you really want to understand, get a good understanding of Roman mythology, but in particular, I suppose the use of what we would call sympathetic magic and things like that. It's a great book. I highly recommend the Golden Bough. I've got the Oxford edition that's abridged. It's a very chunky book, but it originally is in 12 volumes, and is one of the books that, in terms of mythography, that tackled the Jesus myth, actually, where a lot of mythographers would be very scared to go near it. And for anybody, I know we're jumping topic a wee bit here, but in terms of, we've discussed different mythographers that influence Frank Herbert, in particular Lord Raglan, Joseph Campbell, etc., etc. But we've a few other people who work in this field in the 19th century, etc. It was interesting that, particularly within the context of Dune, that as much as Paul Atreides is modelled on an awful lot of religious figures, messiahs, heroes, etc., etc. One of them that's not too obvious is Jesus. A lot of these mythographers within sort of British imperial society would be afraid to go near the Jesus myth. And it's interesting that because of that they often explored the myths associated with Muhammad. Particularly here we go, let me see. So it's one of those books where you'll not find, for example, you won't find Jesus in Raglan's, list of figures that on his list, and within Thomas Carlyle's book, which is a book called Hero Worship, and the Heroic in History, which are both great books. I'll show it to you in a wee second. For example, he looks at a variety of different. The hero is prophet. He looks at Muhammad and Islam there, and has no bother doing so, but wouldn't look at Christianity and Jesus in the same way. It's often been a sort of touchy subject amongst Christianity. But as always, for anybody who's not familiar with them, there's The Hero by Lord Raglan, and that's a study on ritual and drama, a study in tradition, myth, and drama. As a book that's just not good repute, if you like, for its. But I think they're absolutely worth reading. I enjoy it. It's a really good book, as I've always said. And Heroes and Hero Worship by Carlyle. There's other books, but particularly, I just thought it was an interesting little point. This point of succession that the Fremen have is very similar to that of the priesthood. Anybody can do it, basically. The other way is that if a leader dies kind of out in the desert, on the job, if you like, then basically it seems that they have a free-for-all stab fest amongst whoever wants to go for it. And the winner of that, um, as it's put here, slew amongst the strongest of his tribe. A leader died in the desert. We're told that this is the way that Stilgar had risen to be Naib. So, like a battle royale, if you like. Last man standing is the leader. I suppose you end up with the strongest fighter or the one that hasn't engaged all the other fighters, if you like, the smartest fighter. But their methods of choosing leadership leave much to be desired. So we get some thoughts about it. I'm your friend Stilgar. No man doubts it. It's the way. So a wee bit of a change of subject again. They've got a tired worm on their hands, we're told. My main problem with this chapter is that there's I think it's a little bit disjointed, and I'm going to sort of say it's around this, but it's hard to get a sense of time and movement within this chapter. I think Frank doesn't do a good job of making it quite clear. We get a bit of sense, yeah, we're driving a worm, but it's hard to get a sense of distance traveled or time, I think. And the events seem to happen on top of each other very quickly. So it's one of those ones that I think there's some good writing in this chapter, but in terms of, and I think that, don't get me wrong, the narrative, the dialogue, sorry, is paced well, but I just found it hard to get a sense of where we were in terms of movement, and the time that's gone by within these eight or 9 pages. So Paul says that we should leave this maker in deep sand. This worm that no one has ever seen the like in Fremen experience, this gigantic old man of the desert. Stilgar agrees, yes, we could walk to the cave from here. So Paul says we've ridden him for enough that he'll bury himself in sulk for a day or so. So it's once again, I suppose, the Fremen's chthonic deity, the worm that they worship, is a form of transport used in rites of passage, I suppose. And their god is a sulky god. Likes to go and have a huff and a sulk after being driven around by some Fremen teenagers for the day. It is kind of funny when we think about it. So again, you're the Mudir of the Sandrider. Say when we get cut off at this point. Mudir is a word that we don't have an entry for in the back of. We've encountered it already once in this chapter, but I didn't scribble the definition down the first time. I have it here the second time, and it's a word that we hear in reference to the beast Raban. So we're told that Mudir Naya is the Fremen name for the beast Raban, Count Raban of Lankavile. The Harkonnen cousin who was Sandrider, governor of Arrakis for many years. The name is often translated as demon ruler here. So in this sense, the word Naya would be the word demon, I think. But Mudir here would mean ruler within the Fremen language. And Kaladin Bahildon's website has a little bit of work on this. This is an Arabic word that Mudir means ruler within Fremen, but in Arabic is close to the word, equivalent of the word manager, basically. You're the boss of the worm manager, the worm boss today, etc., etc. So you're the Mudir of the Sunrise. Say and he broke off and stared at the eastern sky. Paul, world. And here we have, by the way, something quite interesting. I'll just read this and tell you what the interesting thing is, I suppose. Spice blue overcast on his eyes made the sky appear dark. Richly filtered azure against which a distant rhythmic flashing stood out in sharp contrast. Ornithopter. And one small thopter, Stilgar confirms. Now, just it's something that we've talked about before in the past, folks. Was simply that we could, at the end of this, as we read Dune, there are lots and lots of drugs within Dune. Sorry, bear with me a second. I'm going to put my chair up. That's a bit better, isn't it? Looking particularly small. There are lots of different Dune drugs within Dune. Melange just being one of them. And we talked about the different side effects of melange. There are different people use melange for different reasons. And of course, the Fremen end up with the saturation of their eyes, or the blue and the blue within blue within blue of the eyes because of the saturation of the drug in their blood. As far as I was concerned, I always thought it was cosmetic. Oh, look at the cool, aren't they got cool, sexy, groovy, blue eyes? And apparently not. There is an effect here. So this is one of the side effects of melanges. Pardon me, is that we're told that the spice blue overcast on his eyes made the sky appear dark. So they create a filter basically in the eyes, from what this statement makes. That what they're seeing, I suppose, isn't the same as someone who would look out on this landscape without melange addiction, I suppose. So it makes their eyes darker, or their field of vision, whatever they're seeing, appear darker, richly filtered azure. So there we go. It's look, if you want to get a sense of being a Fremen, get those blue tinted sunglasses. Haven't had a pair of them since the 90s. One small thopter. So again, we've had this bit of a bit of rising tension between the two men. I think there's a bit of attempt to change the subject here and there and sort of smooth it over a bit between them. And it's an unspoken tension that's been overtly arisen, I suppose. And we have all of these young male. We talk about angry young men. What Frank Herbert thinks about male aggression, particularly in young people. And I suppose I've talked a wee bit about some books that deal with that topic within science fiction. Like Clockwork Orange would be a really, really good example. And it's subtle. Herbert's it doesn't like to teach us or be, overt about this kind of thing. But it's, as we pick up this apart, we should note that the young men and the potential of their violence does create problems for people and makes them alter their decisions or have to deal with things in a way that they wouldn't want to, potentially even kill people. One small thopter says, Stilgar, Paul said, could be a scout. Do you think they've seen us? At this distance, we're just a worm on the surface. Motion with his left hand, off, scatter on the sand. And I've just put a wee note here. This is as much as Paul's got control of the worm, something happens, off, everybody off, on the sand now, everybody gets off. Stilgar takes control immediately here, no ifs or buts about it, and he's obeyed. The troop begin working down the worm's sides, dropping off and blending in with the sand beneath their cloaks. Paul marked where Chani dropped. Presently, only he and Stilgar remained. And of course, Paul says, we get another one of the Fremen rules here for worm riding: first up, last off. Stilgar doesn't really need to say anything, just nodded, dropped down the side on his hooks, and leaped onto the sand. Paul waited, we're told, until the Maker was clear of the scatter area, released his hooks, and this was the tricky moment when the worm was not entirely exhausted. So we can have a cranky, tired worm here. And the worm, of course, free of its goads and hooks, we're told, began burrowing into the sand. Paul ran lightly back along its broad surface, judging his moment carefully, and he leapt off. We're told he landed running, lunged against the surface of a dune the way he'd been taught, and hid himself beneath the cascade of sand over his robe. Now, the waiting. And it's a good, again, nice little build of tension. We've had a shift of action here as well, just to divert us a little bit. We're told that Paul turned gently and exposed the crack of sky beneath the crease in his robe, and imagined the others doing the same. So he's having a wee, as much as he's buried in the sand, he's having a wee nosy, keeping an eye out what's going on. He heard the beat of the thopter's wings before he saw it. A whisper of jet pods came over his path of the desert. So as much as he's looking out through this little slit, if you like, in his cloak buried under the sand, the thopter goes right over that line of sight. And then we're told it turned in a broad arc towards the ridge. So Paul's thoughts on this is it's an unmarked thopter. It doesn't have any Harkonnen or Imperial signals on it or anything like that. And it flew out of sight beyond Habanya Ridge. We're told a bird cry sounded, then another, and we get a few signals basically from the Fremen that are perfect, imitating natural sounds, of course. And then Paul emerged and climbed to the dune top with the other figures stood in a line trailing away from the ridge. Yeah, it's quite an interesting picture, if you like, of this and the action within it as well. Good wee moment of tension, and of course it's going to spur the action along a wee bit. Paul, we're told, recognized Chani and Stilgar amongst them. And so as much as we started with a mention of the smugglers, we're going to end the chapter with the smugglers here. Not too much more to go. So Stilgar signaled towards the ridge, and they gathered there and began the sandwalk, gliding over the surface in a broken rhythm that would disturb no maker. Stilgar paced himself beside Paul along the crest of a dune. So Stilgar's, this is the conversation they have here now. Stilgar says it was a smuggler craft. Paul, so it seemed, but this is deep into the desert for smugglers. They have their difficulties with patrols too, says Stilgar. So as much as whatever goes on with the Fremen, etc., it seems that the smugglers generally have to put up with the same nonsense to get up to their activities in the desert, avoiding Harkonnens, etc., this kind of thing, probably avoiding Fremen. So of course they have difficulties with their patrols too. If they come this deep, they may go deeper, says Paul. And Stilgar says, true. Paul, it wouldn't be well for them to see what they could see if they ventured too deep into the south. Smugglers sell information too. They were hunting spice, don't you think, said Stilgar. Paul replies, there will be a wing and a crawler waiting somewhere for that one. We've spice. Here we go. So this is the interesting moment, I think. They were hunting spice, don't you think, says Stilgar. There will be a wing and a crawler waiting somewhere for that one. We've spice. Let's bait a patch of sand and catch us some smugglers. They should be taught that this is our land and our men need practice with the new weapons. Stilgar's response to this, now Usul speaks. Usul thinks Fremen. So as much as I think this going back to Paul's sort of hyperbolic speech earlier on, I was never a Fremen until this day. You kind of, this kind of the response from Stilgar, I think, was not happy. And what do you want to do with the way I look at it is this: Paul's passed his driving test, if you like. He's conquered the worm, and he receives a boon out of that. What do you want to do with your boon? What do you want to do with this gigantic war machine? And Stilgar is expecting, hoping, I think, for a Fremen response. What do I want to do with this gigantic worm that is bigger than any worm that's ever been seen, and this band of really angry-looking young men who want blood? Maybe we should just go raid, shall we? I think is the Fremen answer that Stilgar's been wanting, and as much as there's been an uncomfortableness between the two men that I think both are keen to resolve in their own way. I think both are quietly desperate to resolve in their own way, but also have to present a public face to the troop and to all the young men in particular. And you can imagine that they're just getting jacked up on this wild ride that Paul's taking, on this slaughter fest of power and violence. So the response at the end, I think, is the kind of, what do you want to do with this worm, is kind of what Stilgar was hoping for. And I get the sense that this interruption between the two men, who shouldn't be enemies at this point, it's almost like they're being forced into a situation by the nature of, I suppose, Fremen succession, all of that. you kind of think it is a bit stupid. And why didn't they figure out we should do something else? We should make it maybe less easy for some idiot with a knife to become put in charge. I would suggest that each Fremen tribe would be wildly susceptible to the rule of a dictator. And I'll almost argue that the leader of I suppose the tribe is almost a dictator, but he's a benign one in that sense. Yeah. So the response there. Let's set a trap. Yes, it's now Usul speaks. This is Usul thinks, Fremen. This isn't Paul Muad'Dib. This is Usul. But it's Paul's thoughts here just to end. So I think there's a real, and it's of course there's an enemy here that's not them, and the thing that's dividing these two men, I suppose, is the laws, the ways of their own society, of Fremen society. The thing that unites them again at the end of this chapter is an enemy, the enemy of their friends again. I think it's the relationship repaired. Hopefully, there's more to go with this, but I think it's a great moment. I get a sense of real happiness and joy for Stilgar. Now Usul speaks. Usul thinks, Fremen. Yeah. But of course, Paul's thoughts are punctuate this a little bit. But Usul must give way to decisions that match a terrible purpose. And the storm was gathering. There we go. And a lovely little touch from Frank at the end there. Nice and ominous. And we've had a big moment, I suppose, for Paul. It's a short little chapter. I think I said I have a little bit of problem with the pacing, and it's not the dialogue or anything. It's just it all seems a little bit too quick, and I don't get quite a sense of how much time has passed in this chapter. But apart from that, I'd say that's my main criticism of the chapter. Apart from that, I think the dialogue in it is very well done. I think it's, if you read it out loud to yourself, the men sound distant from each other compared to that there is something, a wedge between them, and there's an attempt at reconciliation, and almost that both men are fatalistic about it. It's the way, and let's not be, let's just, if it's the way it is, it's the way it is, but let's not fall out over that. I get that real sense that both men are trying to repair this thing that's come in to damage the relationship, and it is this orthodox thinking. It's the way things must be, the way the young men demand it, and they are, aggressive and armed, and seem to act and seem to be represented in the book, to be honest with you, as a chorus. I think Jamis was as a good example of one of these young men removed in isolation. We get to see what one of them's like, but they're very much like a chorus here, I think. I don't know if you guys agree. But there we are. We're at the end of chapter 42. And of course, chapter 43 is going to be, it's good like that. There's nothing short anymore, I suppose. And it leaves us with a little bit of a cliffhanger. And the tension is building. We've got tension within the Fremen, tension within the Fremen leadership. We've got the smugglers arriving. What's going on here? And of course, we know things are building towards a head. So it's a nice little ominous tone to end the chapter with. And of course, we're going to, within the next chapter, we're going to see a bit of action. And of course, the return of Gurney Halleck, which is also a thing that features within Paul's visions. Though it's been another one of those things. And I suppose it's a bit like Stilgar here. There are futures where Paul can have Stilgar and prevent the jihad, and futures where that's not the case, where he must lose Stilgar. And I think there have also been futures where Gurney Halleck is alive and futures where Gurney Halleck is dead. And of course, so we're going to get the return of Gurney Halleck in the next chapter, which I'm looking forward to. And of course, a little bit of Fremen on smuggler action, and there's more intrigue within. So we get a wee bit of intrigue there too. We'll get more intrigue within that chapter. Of course, we start to find out that, that the Sardakar have been infiltrating things and so on and so forth. So there we go. If anybody's got any questions or anything, fire away, by the way, folks. Excuse me. Otherwise, I'll wrap things up shortly. In terms of once again, I must apologize for being off for so long and attempting to get sort of things going in half starts and half stops. So I've kind of decided that rather than me, just because of the nature of my health, I suppose at the minute, I'm finding it hard to be punctual, and I don't like letting people down. So I'm going to try and get the work done for each chapter as it goes, and I'll pretty much pop it up within a day or so of it going online, providing I'm feeling all right. I'm hoping I'm through this, fingers crossed. Um, but again, just to apologize, it's been very difficult for me to do anything. I've been pretty much chained to the bathroom for about a month. So there we go. I'm hoping to do a wee sort of as much as we'll work on, and we'll get the next chapter up soon. We've not too much. What's ahead is a bit of work. It's almost like as much as you think of what we've done, what's to go is almost another novel. Really, it's a short novel or novella. So there's plenty more to get through yet, even though we're on our way to the end of the book. And I was hoping to pop on and do a wee live chat. So just something nice and relaxed about. I was just going to scribble a big list of science fiction, fantasy properties, TV, movies, and books, etc., that have turned up over the last year, and some things that are nice to keep a wee bit of an eye out for. But I'm hoping to actually just sort of shoe something in soon, that because I've read all of these Michael Moorcock books recently, all the Elric series, and I'm just reading, as I said, just picked up the Citadel of Forgotten Myths. I've been reading a few other bits and pieces as well. I've been reading some Higneus, and I managed to pick. I've discovered that I'd lost a book, sadly, probably to Unscrupulous Landlords, damp a long time ago, which is one of the books that I want to be talking about soon, which is, of course, Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land. Really gutted, because I would have a bunch of them with certain covers. So I'm not astounded by the cover on this at all, but compared to some of the ones I have. But certainly well worth a read. I have read this Strange in a Strange Land once, and would be very happy to read it again. 622 pages. And I was going, is this the one that I read? It looks a bit thicker than I thought. And so just to read, for anybody who's interested, I suppose, in picking up a copy of Strange in a Strange Land, this one is the original version, complete and uncut. And I thought, yeah, I do remember it being quite that thick. So just within the preface of the book, the earlier edition contained a few words over 160,000, while this one has 220,000. So you're getting your the complete Strange in a Strange Land. If anybody hasn't read it, highly recommend it. But I'd sort of kind of tried to organize my Robert Heinlein books a wee bit, and had noticed a massive "Where's my Stranger in a Strange Land?" and it seems to have gone the way of the dodo. So I just took an opportunity to pick up another copy in case we need to have a look at it. So oh, there we go. There we are. So, of course, I think there's plenty of Dune news, etc., about as well. But there we go, folks. Thank you very much. It was a really nice short chapter, this one. They're not often as short as this in this book, so it's nice to get through it. And I'd like to thank you all very much for joining me. But I'm going to sign off and maintain my throat, do my best. I have my honey and water and coffee here and everything, and getting into the habit of drinking a lot more water, keeping up those precious bodily fluids, as we like to say on the station. But in the meantime, I will say all the very best to you all. Thank you very much for joining me here on the station. I will hope to see you soon. And it's quite possible that before we hit chapter 43, we might do a wee sci-fi night and just have a wee chat about some stuff. Because I've been down to have a natter about all sorts of things that have happened over the last year. And just even kind of to bring last year into review, if you see what I mean. And have a wee look at the year ahead. Because I think we have another Dune film at the end of the year, which will be, I think we're all looking forward to it. So there we go, folks. Look after yourselves no matter where you are. Take care. And you all have a good night. And I will, as I said, I'm being a wee bit lazy with my correspondence. I will definitely, if you've sent me a wee message or a comment or an email, will definitely get caught up to you guys soon. Just life's got busy for me because I haven't been able to get much done over the last month, and everything's piled up. There's Tereos. Have a good night, y'all, and see you soon. Thank you very much, Babs. All the very best, folks. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Good night. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye bye.